Hi everybody, I'm going to give you a little demo of Lightroom today to get you started on editing the photos for your photography portfolio. So the first thing when you get into Lightroom is you're going to notice that you're going to get a bunch of pop-ups for tips popping up. I think you should all read those tips. They're actually super helpful as you go through, so don't turn it off when you first pop in. Read through them and it allows you to sort of see what options are available within the program. And I'm just going to show you a few to get you started today. So once you get in here, you'll see here's our workspace. Navigator over here. This is the library here where we're going to see all of our photos come in a second. And over here you're going to see shortly when we have a photograph in here, you'll see a histogram, which is basically a graph that shows the color tone relationship that's in the photograph. And then you're going to be seeing different filters and changes to exposure that you can do to your photos over here. This over here is called the left panel. This is called the right panel. That makes life easy. Here's the import button to get your photos in. As soon as you hit import, your computer is going to look for places where you have photographs stored. Hopefully you've got your photographs organized before you even get into this process, okay? You should make sure that you've at least gone through and perhaps deleted the majority of the photos you know are not good, and now you're just working with your favorites at this point. I have one here called Lightroom Demo Photos from Photos from Argentina, and you can see you have the options of checking all, unchecking all, and then you just hit import here on the right. It's going to pop them in here. You're going to see them in your library here. You're also going to see them down below as well. And when you want to work on them, you can navigate through here, or you can navigate down here as well. Either one is fine. When you find one that you like and you're ready to start editing it, you go and you hit the Develop tab at the top. It's going to take a second to load. Now here's that histogram I was talking about. This shows you the range of colors that are in the photograph and the tonal relationships of those colors. As you start to edit the picture, you're going to see this histogram change. So let's show you a couple of things that you can do just in this basic menu here. If you look here, if I fold down this triangle, I've got all these other menus here in the right panel used for editing. The basic has a number of different things you can do. You can change the temperature of the photograph. You see when I pull it down it gets cooler or warmer. I don't usually play with that one too much, to be honest. Exposure control, less exposed, more exposed, overexposed. So if you took a photograph that you think was a little bit too bright or too dark, you can fix it there. You can increase or decrease the contrast of the photo, which will really brighten up your blacks and whites. So sometimes that actually makes a photo look really nice. It kind of pops it. Highlights and shadows. This one I don't think has too much to do with those, but if you play around with that in a photo that has really strong highlights or the shadows need to be pulled down a little somewhat, you can do that in here. And watch how the histogram's changing as I go through. Looking for whites to be brighter, very similar to the highlight and shadow, but it focuses specifically on whites and blacks. Presence, clarity will actually give you some interesting sharpening. It's actually quite nice to turn the clarity up a little bit. Vibrance is a saturation feature that looks to saturate colors that aren't already fully saturated. So if I really pull this up, look how the color of the yellow on the background changes. It's a little bit wild. If you pull it down, you're going to get this kind of split toning effect that is gorgeous. And I'm going to show you to do another split tone effect later, where you see how almost everything's gone black and white except the red of her dress. Kind of cool. You can pop vibrance up a little bit. Again, it depends on what you really want this photograph to look like later. Now the difference between vibrance and saturation is saturation will saturate every color in the picture. So if I pull this puppy up here, look at this, like her skin is turned yellow, the dress is super red, the grade at the back has gone really yellow. So saturation is something definitely that can be really nice to play with, but kind of be careful with it. Try to play with vibrance and clarity first. Alright, let's go back up to the basic menu and shut it down. Tone curves play around with different parts of the photograph and the histogram, so you can pull things up and down. I don't tend to play around with this one too much unless my photograph has some really bad exposure problems. In this case, I'm not really going to be too worried about it. These two menus you're going to play around with quite a bit. HSL color, black and white. This is a place to adjust all the individual hues in your photographs, to pull the reds. Look how it's playing with the red of her dress. It's adding warmth and oranges. You can completely change all your reds to orange. It's making it more pink on this end of the scale. You can play with the oranges. Now, not every color exists in every photograph, but this one certainly probably has every color in it. So you can play around with how the color is applied to the photograph in there. Kind of fun. Under color, again, you can choose all the different colors. It's a little bit, this is pretty similar to the HSL menu. You can break them down a different way. Black and white is going to be really important when we get to your safe spaces photograph. The cool thing about this version of the black and white filtering is that you're playing around with every color in the photograph. So notice how I'm playing with red and I'm dropping it down and the red is going almost black. You want to find in your black and white photograph for your safe spaces project that you have a pure white somewhere in your photograph and that you have a very black as well. We're going to mess around with this a little bit more. And you can also get that by playing around with your brightness and contrast too. Some of these won't make as big of a difference. You can see some of that happening in the background there. Purple is just pretty minimal. Magenta also quite minimal as well. That's looking pretty good there. I think I'd like to play around with some exposure. And this one now, try to get a little bit brighter. There's the contrast and getting some better detail in the dress here. So you can see that when you're using Lightroom, you're mixing around between all of these, all of the different menus all the time, trying to get the effect that you're looking for in the photograph. When you get to a point where you think you kind of like what's happening in here, there's this really cool feature over here called snapshot. So if I got to this point and I thought, okay, I still want to mess with it a little bit, but I want to take a snapshot of what this looks like. You can click snapshot and you could call it, this is a tango scene, so I'm going to call it Tango 1 and hit create. At any point when you're editing in Lightroom, you can go back in time. So see how everything that I've just done here, watch the screen up here, everything that I've just done, I can go back. So I actually kind of like this color version of the photograph I took previously. Let's go back here and see if I can scroll up here and take a snapshot of this one, Tango Color 1. Cool, great. So now I've got a couple of versions I can play with. I'm going to go back to Tango 1, but this history tab here is super important. And actually when you save, you actually don't have to formally save your work in Lightroom. When you leave, all of this stuff attached to this photograph will stay in Lightroom. You can export your final picture that you really like, but all of this data that's attached to the file that you've created actually stays inside Lightroom as you're working, which is really handy. So let's go to split toning. This is kind of fun. I think we'll split tone some highlights maybe. You can use some of these presets here. These are sort of standard split tone colors. This is like, obviously we've got a gray, there's a sepia tone, a couple of different sepia tones, a blue, a light blue. You can make it whatever you want it. When you hand in your portfolio images, I want to see that you've edited your photographs in Lightroom, that they all look like you've taken the time to consider how that photograph could look best. And something you could experiment with is doing some split toning. It makes the photograph look kind of old. You'll notice that as you play around with a split tone, you'll get all kinds of different colors. Try not to go too wild with it. Potentially you just want to add a little bit of that color. I even think this is getting a bit dark. You can lower the saturation of that applied split tone as well. Basically what it's going to do to a black and white photograph is give you that other layer of color on top. You could do the exact same thing with the shadows if you wanted. That's kind of cool. I like the look of that now. Shadows are blue, but we also have this overlay of like a sepia tone orange here too. That looks nice. I think I might take a quick snapshot of that one. Call it split tone. I'll call it Tango Split Tone. Think about ways of naming your photographs that help you define them later. Okay, I'm going to close that down. Detail, this will help with sharpening. You can go and increase the sharpness of the photograph. You don't want to go too far. When you go really far, you're going to start to get breakdown of pixels. Actually, you can kind of see that a little bit when you look in here. The higher I sharpen, the more the pixels become visible. So you don't want to go too crazy with that. You can, if your photograph looks a bit fuzzy, you could go in there and sharpen a little bit as well. Play around with radius and detail. Luminance also plays around with the sharpness. It'll sort of reduce some of the noise that's happening from sharpening, which is helpful. Noise being like the little dots that you have when you can see pixels. Yeah, so play around under the detail menu there. And lens corrections, let's leave that one for now. And effects, I think we'll leave that one for now. Well, there's a really cool vignette, post-crop vignetting. That's kind of interesting. So obviously you don't want to use this white. It's terrible. But if you go black, this is like an Instagram when you can add a vignette on your photo if you guys use Instagram. But look how I can kind of make a spotlight on the dancers. You can get pretty specific with it too. I don't want it to be that obvious that I've added a vignette, but I love how it adds like a little bit of toning onto the cobblestone street down there. So that's kind of cool. That's a cool effect you can add in. You can throw in more grain. This is going to make your photograph look kind of old-timey if you go too far with it. So just be careful about that. There's a feather for the vignette, so notice how this is really obvious circle, and then as I feather it out, it just like in Photoshop makes that opacity edge of the effect kind of bleed away. Okay, I'm going to take a snapshot of that one. Tango, what do we call it? Split tone 2. I like it. Okay, so I think that's a good way to start. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to save or export this image. So I told you before that when you save in Lightroom, or as you're working in Lightroom, you don't need to go in and keep saving all the time. But let's say you've decided this is the final one and you want to export it. Go to File, Export. You can choose a specific folder. Let's maybe put this in my demo folder. So I'm going to get to my desktop and Lightroom demo. Great, that's going to be where I'm keeping my photos that I'm exporting. It's going to put it into a subfolder called Untitled Export. I'll call these Tango Photos. Okay, and this is so the export location file naming. You can rename to custom name. So I'm going to call it Tango. Let's call it Split Tone. Great. You can keep scrolling down here. We don't need to worry about video files right now. File setting is great. I want the quality to be quite high on this. So let's bring that up. That you want it to be a JPEG, so you can be using it in multiple different programs. You could play around with sizing your image exactly how you want it to. Let's say you needed it to be this certain exact size for a certain project. That's great. Don't really play around with output sharpening so much. Metadata is all of that information about how you edited the photograph. And also actually metadata even includes things like where you took the photo if your camera has that capability. It's kind of interesting. Watermarking we're not going to deal with. That's if you're a pro photographer and you want to put like a copyright across it so when you post it online people sort of can't use it. And after it processes, we're going to tell it to do nothing. So the program's just going to continue working. You can also have it pop up in Finder or do something else. All right, export. And it's going. It's gone, and it's now on my desktop to work with. So where's my Lightroom demo photos? There they are. And here's my Tango photos, and here's my beautiful Tango photo. Split tone one. Okay, so work around in Lightroom today. Edit your photographs. Remember that you must do for your safe spaces photography a black and white image. If you want to have a little bit of split toning in it like this, that's okay, but photosensitive is looking for a pure black and white photo more than anything. And your other photos can all be in color, but if you decide that one of the photos you've taken would be better in black and white, then absolutely go ahead and do that photo in black and white. So your 10 photos that you're submitting can be color or black and white. The only mandatory black and white is the Safe Spaces one for photosensitive. All right, good luck today. Thanks everybody.